Okay. Okay, now we know. All right, Karen,
Okay.
would you like to?
Hi, I've only got 2 messages before I turn over to John. John's going to introduce Anne and Michael. And I just wanted to let you know we have one more lecture next month for this season. And Sue, this will be our 4th talk on Labrador. And it's great because we've never really had a chance to explore Labrador. And Sue Meads is coming back, and her topic will be flora of the Churchill River Valley, and it'll be pre-hydro development. So that should be quite interesting, right?
Yeah.
And I just wanted, we were talking about it earlier, and I know like the coal split's out and the pussy willows are out. And if over the next couple of weeks and things warm up and you see anything that's blooming early, if you could take a picture and let our members know, and we can post it on our website or send it out to everyone, you know, and just give, you know, give us an idea of where it's to, and we can probably go and take a picture. So anyway, I'm going to turn it over to John. Go ahead, John.
Okay, I'm going to keep this fairly short because we had a talk from Michael and Anne only a couple of months ago. So most of you know these guys, they both spent a lot of time, many years, I suppose, we could say, with Parks Canada and in New Brunswick at Fundy, and in Newfoundland, of course, at Gross Mourne. And both of them are really keen naturalists and hikers and travelers, and they're pretty fond of the Great Northern Peninsula. But they, as you've seen in our previous talk with them, they also seem to be quite interested in Northern Labrador. But they do seem to also travel widely about the world. And so tonight we will have them tell us about their botanical and other exploits in Greece. And I think that's what I'll say. Take it away, guys. Unmute, everybody. Unmute. Yes. I don't know where Michael is. Ah, here we come. We got him. Okay. We got him. There you go. Now, guys, Michael, I don't know if you're muted or not.
Unmute. There. Sorry, this is I can't use my mouse once I start the program, so I have to pop back out. Let's go back to where we were. Doesn't want to work. Okay. For some reason or other, it hasn't started at the beginning. I'm going to try one more time.
Oh, I thought that was the beginning.
No, we'll start here. Go to here. Stop share. Start share. Start program. Now, can everyone see the first slide?
Yes, good.
Sorry, that took a little bit of fiddling around. We had a trip just before COVID hit to Greece. That this is the one we're going to be talking about this evening. It was just in the sort of middle of February that we headed off. 4 of us went, a couple of friends from Norris Point and us. And we had originally planned to be there for 2 full months, but of course that didn't quite work out because COVID nailed us. But we still had a really amazing time in the month of exploration that we had. Just to give people a bit of a feeling for the area that we're talking about, I'd never visited anywhere in continental Europe before. All of our other trips had been to Central and South America, Caribbean, Southeast Asia, Britain, but never on the continent. So this was really all completely new territory to me, and you had never been there either. So Greece is a very wet country. It has a lot of water contained within its boundaries, and a massive number of islands, as well as the mainland of Greece. And if you take all of the mainland of Greece, it's really not a whole lot larger in area than the land surface of Newfoundland. Population of Greece, however, is quite a bit larger. It's about 20 times that of Newfoundland. And for some reason, the slide didn't show.
It did. It was right
Oh,
here.
it was right there.
It was
Okay.
right there. It was
It's a very interesting area floristically because it's sort of at the junction between Europe, Asia, and Africa. And plants have moved in from all directions since the end of the last the last glaciation. And because of the massive sea coast and altitudinal variations and rock types and climatic types, there are loads of niches for a very wide variety of different plants. Because of that, Greece has over 6,600 species and subspecies of vascular plants compared to our 1,300. That's a massive quantity for an area that's really not much larger than the island of Newfoundland. So 4 times the diversity that we have here on the island of Newfoundland. Of those plants, a really huge number, over 1,200, are considered endemic species. We have 3 endemic species here in Newfoundland. Again, there are a lot of differences between where we are and where they are, but it really helps you understand just how interesting floristically a place Greece is for such a small area. Our trip started in Athens, and we visited Mycenae and a couple of places outside Athens, and we went to Crete, and then we went to Rhodes. And at Rhodes, that's, as I say, when COVID started to rear its head and we had to start thinking about coming home. And we'll sort of we'll follow that route through the course of the program this evening. Athens is a pretty huge city, and I'm not really keen on cities for the most part. Here's an aerial view, over 3 million people in Athens. You can see the little green islands in the center of the screen. Those are hills, and all of those hills pretty well are topped with temples, historic structures that are absolutely spectacular. And despite my original lack of interest in spending any time in Athens, we had a really wonderful time. The archaeological sites were fascinating, great museums, people were very friendly, it was easy to get around, and just fascinating in every possible way. So is the part of the city of Athens with one of these temples on the top of a hill looking down over everything. The Acropolis, the most important site with the Parthenon, is the place that we're going to spend a bit of time in a moment. And the Parthenon, this building was originally held a massive statue. This is a suggested reconstruction of what the statue would have looked like. There's no portion of it remaining, but there are a couple of tiny models that probably were based on it. It was 11 meters tall, made of ivory and gold. That's no longer there, but the building that contained it is. And Athens actually is named, it was a statue of Athena, and Athens gets its name from the goddess Athena. And the symbol of Athens is the owl, or an owl. And you see owls in carvings, in pottery, and all sorts of different places throughout the city. Even up on the Acropolis, which is visited by massive numbers of people every year, there are lots of interesting plants right tucked in around the buildings. Here's some golden alyssum popping up along a walkway. Red figwort was coming out of the walls of the buildings. It's amazing how plants can find just a little pocket of soil and be able to survive there. Lots of little ferns, interesting ferns. This one is obviously adapted to periodic drying out, very hairy undersides on the leaves, and almost leather-like leaves. Oh, the other photograph slide didn't show. Funny. There's a beautiful museum just at the base of the Acropolis. And although they had all sorts of wonderful statues and carvings and pieces of pottery and so on, this, for some reason or other, caught my attention. This is
Lego.
a Lego model of the buildings on the top of the Acropolis. And there's a reason for this. I mean, it's not just a weird fascination with this children's toy, but someone had spent a lot of time putting this together to try to give a feeling for what was up on the Acropolis. But when you look at the Lego, and then when you look at the buildings outside, there's something really fascinating that strikes you. It's not changing. It did it again. Sorry. Here we go. This is what I'm looking for. This is one of the buildings on the Acropolis, and it does indeed look like a Lego. Now, I think this is purely by chance. These apparently are purely a design feature. They don't actually serve any function in the building. They probably represent earlier features of earlier temples that would have been made of wood, and maybe some sort of fastener. But it's just too weird when you see the Lego, when you see the buildings themselves. For some reason, I'm sorry, I'm having a bit of a problem getting the slides to change. Every now and then it skips a couple of slides.
It looks, Michael, it looks like there's a picture down off the bottom border.
Yeah, in here.
Maybe your slide is down past the border somehow. Anyway.
Here's where we should be. Okay. Here again, we see the Lego, but we also see a parakeet. There's a number of introduced species that show up in different parts of Greece. And around Athens, you see these redneck parakeets, and you also see monk parakeets, one from South America, and the other from the Himalayas. And they've become quite common. You see them in the parks, and they're almost becoming like pigeons. There are 4 in this photograph. The other 2 of them are really hard to see. They make massive nests, sometimes apparently the size of a VW beetle. This is just up in one of the cedar trees. They're colonial nesters, so that you can have dozens of birds all on the one place. As I say, the architecture was absolutely fascinating. The chance to actually see some of these places that we've read about, heard about, was really a wonderful experience, and I definitely would go back if I could. Oh, come on, machine.
Again, there seems to be a picture down at the bottom, just going off.
Yeah, here we go. Yes, I did get it. So some of these are 3,000-year-old buildings. This is a mere 1,000-year-old Byzantine church, and they're scattered throughout town. There are lots of structures, lots of amazing architecture and sculptures and so on to see, but also interesting plants. This is mid-February. The orange trees are sort of everywhere in the streets, and they're bearing orange, dropping oranges even, left, right, and center. They're bitter oranges, though. They're very, very sour, like Seville oranges. But just to see oranges in the middle of February was a real treat, I must say. And lemons, and banana trees, like ornamental banana. These are some photographs from parks and gardens around Athens. A polygola, a shrub polygola. Again, ours are very uncommon and very tiny. They grow in almost grass-like heights. But this was what, 1.5 meters tall. What a beautiful shrub. Tree ferns brought in. All sorts of interesting exotics, adding to the crossroads feature that Greece already has with its natural wildlife, wild plants. Okay, just pop through a couple of these, and then we'll get to some of the wildflowers, some native ones. Keeps doing that, doesn't it? Whoops. Euphorbia there, disappeared. There we go. Euphorbia, and now to Australia. So we've sort of done a cruise of the continents with plants that have been brought in. Now, back to the actual scenery and the actual sites. This is the temple of Hephaestus, the blacksmith, the god of blacksmiths. Beautiful temple that's still in really, really good shape. Lots of parkland around there, and these amazing lichen covered trees in the middle of the parkland. And in among the rocks, things like the pennyworts popping out of the cracks. Noble Bay, which you'd expect to see through the Mediterranean, seem to be used as hedging in a lot of places. We did spend time in the museums and saw some of the sculptures and carvings that, again, everyone is familiar with. Things that you, whoops, sorry. Things that you again see in books, but finally we had a chance to actually see them in person. Some of them very tiny, some of them even older than the Greek period that we normally think of, and some that seem very modern day. A whole series of Minoan mugs, drinking mugs, probably not for coffee, probably not for tea, but still, they look awfully familiar. A lot of the pottery had animal and plant motifs, very much like today. These are the things that people were thinking of then. These are the things that attracted people's attention and got them interested in, were interesting for the people who were using the implements. Some beautiful glass. And outside, we saw lots of other art, but it was a kind of a different art. Greece has a huge amount of graffiti. It's much more colorful than what we were seeing in the museum, but I don't think it was a better quality somehow. And the artifacts also kind of lacked something. This is an entire store that sold nothing but rubber ducks. Very weird. In Athens and a lot of the other cities, there are bicycles and scooters available for rent. So it's easy to get around. There are buses and the subway. It's no problem to find your way around. And as I say, people were very, very friendly, and the city was remarkably clean. I always heard about the pollution, the air pollution. Maybe that's more of a summer thing when the city is crowded with people. But when we were there, it was cool and pleasant and very clean. Everywhere you go, you see signs of the past. Entire blocks have been excavated, and this is an ancient graveyard. Some buildings, like the museum below the Acropolis, actually have parts of the ancient city underneath them. So you can actually go downstairs and look through glass at the into the excavations, or you use walkways up and over them. It's a pretty fascinating way to glimpse at the past. Mosaics, sort of middle of parks where buildings used to be at one point. Lots of, lots of other signs, even walkways that are being constructed, modern walkways that are being constructed using debris from old buildings, roof tiles and bits of piping and goodness knows what, just sort of set into the ground for walking on. Now to some of the plants. Mediterranean cypress was common everywhere, two different forms, as sort of the spire and form and the sort of spidery open form. They grow side by side everywhere. Turkish pines are these incredibly beautiful lacquered looking cones. And the Mediterranean pine, this is common throughout the area that we visited. But unfortunately, the Mediterranean pine is having a real problem right now with pine processionary moth. This is a tent building caterpillar that chews all the needles off the tree. It's obviously not just eating the fresh needles, but the old needles as well. And they protect themselves by building these silk tents, and they fill with frass, and the frass then drops to the ground. And everywhere you look under the trees, you see piles of these caterpillars which have urticating hairs. So you don't want to actually pick them up or touch them because they'll give you quite an unpleasant rash. Once they finish on one tree, they drop to the ground and then follow each other, looking almost like a piece of rope or a really long snake. And this can be 10 meters long, this twisting, turning, slowly moving trail of caterpillars. And apparently they're having quite an effect on the pine forests. Beneath all this, of course, the ground is completely covered with the frass, with the droppings of the caterpillars. See, it looks like vermiculite everywhere. Another view of the Acropolis. And another view out over the city. Say it stretches on forever. It's a very big city, but very pleasant to visit. But we did get a chance also as we were flying out to get a glimpse at the huge marble quarry that is just outside the city. And this is where most of the marble for the buildings has come from over the millennia, and also a lot of marble that's used today and as curbs and for other construction purposes. And back to the plants, there are a number of different styles of columns or pillars that you see on buildings, but one of the most ornate styles is the Corinthian columns with these beautiful arching leaves on them. And these are taken pretty well directly from the acanthus plant. And right around the base of most of the buildings, you can see acanthus growing with these lovely ornate, shiny leaves. You can see how a carver would find that a fascinating structure to imitate. Throughout the town, we started seeing these yellow flowers, but with the white one on the left, we'll get to in a moment. But the yellow flowers are a very important story for Greece right now. This is an introduced species called the African wood sorrel. It's sort of flourished throughout Greece. And when you're wandering around Athens, every garden has it, every wall has it. It forms almost a solid sheet under some forest in town. It is massively invasive. And as I say, we'll be seeing a little bit more as we proceed through the rest of Greece. From Athens, we took a side trip to Mycenae, which used to be a town of about 30,000 people. This is part of the Lion Gate that led into the so-called palace part of the town up on a hill. And a lot of the wall is still standing. A lot of the structure is still visible, even after all this time. A whole series of interesting artifacts were found at the site over the years, including these death masks, golden death masks, some of which have rather incredible stories that various archaeologists attributed to them. But in most cases, it's really not known who the mask actually was created for. Oops, stuck again. These are daggers, a couple of bronze daggers, where the bronze is almost all corroded away, but the gold and silver inlay is still visible. It's a very beautiful area, very dry up on a hill with flowering almonds and cherries and things. Lots of flowers around the site, including mignonette, white mignonette. This is same genus as the mignonette that you can grow in the garden, but it doesn't have the scent, which is really unfortunate because this gets very tall. This is up to, well, over 1 meter tall. But if it only had the same scent as the garden mignonette, it would be a pretty fantastic plant. Flowering almonds were very common. They were all in full flower at the time we were there. It was the perfect season for it. And we quite enjoyed the hillsides covered with them. Just looking down from Mycenae over the surrounding landscape. lots of wildflowers of different sorts. This is in the forget-me-not family. There's the same sort of droopy flowers, but a very different color from our forget-me-nots. We also visited the Asclepion, which was a hospital, essentially a healing center. Yeah, with the theater, with the stadium, with all sorts of other things built around it, but very important at the time. This is the theater, still in remarkably good shape, with some restoration, and someone reciting poetry down in the middle at the bottom of the seat stands, and you definitely could hear every word of it. It was beautifully designed. Oops, stuck again. Now we're going to pop across to Crete. Went by plane to Crete, and oops, come on, do it. There we go. It's quite a long island, almost 300 kilometers from end to end, and we visited a number of sites. We rented a car and poked around into several different locations, mostly on the west, but really, again, found it very enjoyable, very accessible. Come on. Sorry, this is really annoying because it keeps stopping from, it will not advance me the way it should. This is a very simple geological map of Crete, and the thing to notice is all the yellow, which is limestone, the sort of very light yellow, which is also limestone, the serpentine, which is black, and the fleisch. All of those will have some basic elements, and some, like the serpentine, will be ultra basic. And so there are a lot of interesting plants that like alkaline conditions that we came across as we poked around Crete. This is the city of Hania, where we spent our first bit of time on the island, including these 1300s Venetian boathouses that line the harbor. Couple of quick photographs of the town. And now you start to see mountains in the background covered in snow. This is our first inkling that we were going to hit snow during our trip in Greece because of the elevation, yeah. This is a very old mosque. Couple of great museums with this is a maritime museum that had a whole series of boat models that were really quite fun, and some architectural photographs, one of Anne's. And now back to, you can see the mountains towering over the back of town.
So they're about 3,000 meters?
I think so, yes, yeah. These are, I think, fig trees that have been trained, are being trained into arches over one of the streets, which is interesting. We ran to that in a number of different places. Hania was great while we were there. Lots of restaurants, very open town to explore. I imagine it gets extremely busy during the summer. With that many restaurants, obviously they were expecting a lot of guests. Now to another archaeological site. This is on the island of Crete, a Minoan city site, a city that had at one time an estimated 100,000 population, which is far more than there are living there now, in the area now. The site has been partially restored. That's why the pillars look in such great condition. But for the most part, you have to get a feeling for what was there just by the bases of the walls. Also, there's some great art reconstructions showing what it might have looked like. some of the murals have been reconstructed as well. This is where the legend of King Minos was based. The whole story of the Minotaur and the labyrinth. And supposedly that's based on the labyrinthine warehouses that were under the so-called palace area. Even today, you can see that there's just a series of corridors with side storage areas and side channels and so on. It really was quite a complicated palace. Lots of fascinating archaeological material has been removed or found at the site, including these huge storage jugs. These were for olive oil. Stuck again. This is a view down from the palace site over what's now fields, but at the time that the site was used, this was probably flooded enough that boats could pull up around the base of the hill that the palace is on. We did run into a lot of cats in Greece. That was the most common wildlife that we came across. They, again, mostly very, very friendly. And some interesting birds. We unfortunately have this is a terrible photograph, but we did get a quick glimpse at a kingfisher. Stuck now.
So
Oh, there we go.
below. Oh,
Yeah, it just won't go forward.
okay, yeah.
Let's do it again. Oh. Sorry, more introduced species. These were wandering around the site making quite a racket, but they're always fun to look at. And you see these a lot. This is some kind of a chimney wind vane that people use. And so it looks like cormorants are sitting on everyone's chimney tops, but it's just a metal chimney vane. Back to the almonds, we cruised around the country once we left Knossos and spent a lot of time just admiring these trees, these flowering trees that were everywhere. And this, as I got to do the driving, and this one I almost drove off the road when we came to it. The name of the town was absolutely perfect because of what we had been doing. It means almond head. It was surrounded by almond trees. It couldn't have been better located. These are the couple that we were in Greece with, Barb and Eugene Bellows, at a place that they had hoped to visit. A friend was from. The towns off the main road are pretty small and the streets are very narrow, so you have to drive very carefully. And it's difficult in a car, and we were driving a fairly small car. So I have great respect for this guy who was driving a massive water truck and actually getting through the same streets that we were having difficulty going through. Outside the fields and the grass areas beneath the orchards, the olive orchards, were covered with anemones. This was something I'd hoped to see, and we got there right in the peak of the flowering period. This is a really beautiful part of the wildflowers of Greece. You often see solid colored stands of them, and the colors will change from place to place, but it's all the same species. Yes, and you're starting to see again the oxalis, the African oxalis in the background here. And from now on, we're going to be seeing acres and acres and acres of this stuff. So whether it's actually pushing out some of the local wildflowers, such as the crown anemone, is an interesting question because it is just so common everywhere. This is a different anemone, a smaller one, Heldrich's, that is which prefers much more basic soils. We did see a couple of those. And this blessed wood sorrel, we saw it in Athens. And now if you start looking at the countryside here, everything is yellow. It's just everywhere, just completely overtaken the meadows and the orchards, the vineyards, yes. It's quite beautiful in a way, but it's scary how much there is. It is, it is. Yeah, there's very little natural land that you see as you're driving around. It is all cultivated in some way or another, and it has been for thousands of years. Yeah, the bees there, yeah. We'll find some more a bit further ahead. The lower parts of the valley seem to be full of olive orchards, and some of the trees were obviously extremely old. You can see the size of the trunk on this one. And up on, back to the olives still, 1 second here. Olive pits everywhere. We'll go up onto the hillsides a little bit more, and then you start to see vineyards up on the hills themselves. And almost all of these are irrigated. They get very dry during the summer, and so you see these massive tangles of plumbing popping out of the roadsides everywhere. Where they're actually getting the water from is an interesting question. We did see lots of honeybees. You can see a small pile of beehives down on the right side of the screen. There's the apiarist working away. More oranges.
In this case, it's an orange grove.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, yeah. And back to the Minoans, here's a pendant looking at bees and the importance of bees to the Minoans. We got a chance to take a look at a very tired carpenter bee at one point. It was sitting on some steps. These are about over an inch long. It's a very big, very healthy looking bee, well, in size, and very robust. They actually use their very powerful jaws to chew through wood and chew tunnels in which they can lay their eggs, hence the name carpenter bee. On some of the trees is on the bark of a pine, we saw some cicada nymphal skins, but we didn't actually see or even hear the cicadas themselves. And praying mantis eggs, it's almost like plasticky foam full of eggs waiting for the warmer weather before they hatch out. John, this is for you.
Yeah. Oh, yes. Yeah.
As I
This is
say,
gonna go.
don't know how they kept them in. Oh, there is one trying to escape there.
Yeah.
We saw a few lizards, but it was still, I guess, a bit early and a bit cool for most of them to be out. And apparently everyone thinks these things are terribly poisonous, and they back away from them rather quickly, but they're completely harmless. Back to the asphodel, we saw it in Athens. There was one on one of the photographs, but in Crete, it is everywhere. It's like fireweed here. Everywhere you look, you see clumps of asphodel, and they're over 1 meter tall. They're very robust, beautiful plants, and they have a long flowering period. And you can see where our false asphodel gets its name. It's not really related. It's in a different family. But it does bear a striking resemblance to this very much bigger true asphodel. Came across some interesting seed capsules as well. This is a little buckler mustard, and these beautiful spirals, double spirals of the black medic. Thyme was everywhere. Rosemary was everywhere. It really, this idea of Mediterranean herbs, all of a sudden you can see why they get used so much. Also, a lot of things weren't in flower yet, but we did get to see some very beautiful leaves of different plants. These will obviously be out and really interesting in the summer, but this leaf is architecturally rather fascinating. Lots of big thistles with almost white or pale blue leaves. And this, I have absolutely no idea what this is. We've tried everything we can think of, but if anyone has any idea, I would love to know. Abretia, wild Abretia, a couple of different colors just popping out of the bases of walls. Golden crown daisy. This is the original field marigold or calendula. The kind that we grow in our gardens now have really huge flowers, but these are only about the size of a quarter. They're very tiny, delicate little flowers in the wild. Redbud, honeywort, again in the same family as forget-me-nots. And right along the coast, you see a lot of cistus, different colored cistus that is related to our, oh yeah, that was in the roads, yeah, to our, what's one we grow in the garden? Forgot the name.
Rock rose?
Rock rose, yes, the Helianthemum, thank you. We saw just this one tiny little wild cyclamen in flower, very delicate little plant up on the side of a hill. And a very robust dragon arum. These things can get, gosh, we saw stems that must have been getting up well over a meter, and very beautifully decorated stems. We didn't see them in flower, but this is what they would look like in flower. I would love to kind of have seen one. Up again, here we go. This is the only arum that we did see, a very tiny little friar's cowl. Skirting cucumber with a passenger of some sort of lady beetle, ladybird. Viper's bugloss. Here in the background, again, you see the frass from the pine processionary moth everywhere under the trees. Oops. Don't have common name for that one. Common mallows. These are all just ditch plants there. They're growing everywhere. Gadget, which is like a little tiny tulip. This is popping out of the rock wall of a castle that we visited.
We're still early for the tulips, aren't we?
Yeah. Yellowhorn poppy. This is on the coast. Beautiful big patch of this blue leaf poppy with very leathery, waterproof leaves. The spines are all over it. Beautiful plant. Henbane. This is one of the very toxic plants that used to be used as well, medicinally, hallucinogenically, as a poison, all series of historic uses, and it's very common there.
In pretty waste places, though, isn't it? Yeah.
Yes, yeah, always rocky. And mandrake, another plant of in the Solanaceae, another one with very powerful alkaloids that it uses to protect itself, but which are we used again magically and medicinally by humans over the centuries. This is one that there were all sorts of legends about. It was supposed to emit a scream when you pulled it out of the ground, and so you had to be very careful because the scream would drive a human crazy. This is probably made by the Mandrake Gatherers Union or something, this particular legend. So the story was you had to have a dog, and you would tie the dog to the mandrake plant, and then you'd put something in your ears and throw some food in front of the dog, and the dog would yank the mandrake out of the ground, And it might go crazy, but at least you wouldn't. Anyway, the reason people were harvesting these things was for their roots, which they thought looked very human-like. And because they look like an entire human body, by the doctrine of signatures, this ancient medical belief, it was obviously good for curing anything that was wrong with you. It covered all the ground. So it was a very important medicinal plant at that time. And you do see, again, lots of it around. Here it is popping out of a tiny hole in a piece of limestone up on an absolutely parched hillside with a few other small plants around it. This is a natural rock garden and one of the driest places that we visited, and it was quite happy there. Carob trees are native to the area. This is the carob from which the seeds are used, are obtained for making now chocolate-like powders. But originally, one of its uses was as a weight. The seeds come from the pods, and the seeds are pretty well always the same size and the same weight. So they were used for weighing very light things. A certain number of carob seeds would be used as a measure for jewels or something like that. Hence our term carats now, which is a corruption of carob.
So it's a unit.
A unit, yeah. Mastic, a plant in the poison ivy family, grows along the roadsides. It's as far as I know, not toxic to touch. We certainly do without any problem. But if it's bruised, it releases a resin. And there was quite a business collecting the resin in different Greek islands for use as a chewing gum. In fact, our word mastication, to chew something, comes from the name of this plant, the Greek name for this plant. Mint relative, catchfly, again, more ditchweeds. We weren't able to go a great distance off the road, so most of these are just plants that we came across as we were walking along trails and roads and just exploring by car and screamed to a stop because we'd seen something interesting and all jumped out. So tamarisk, yeah, this is the flower head of the Smyrna tamarisk, and the flowers are microscopic, but there are millions of them. The entire plant goes white with flowers, and each flower is not much more than 1 millimeter across, but it's very impressive when you go past the entire tree of it. There. Another introduced species we found along the coast, New Zealand spinach. This is in the a family of plants that's very common in South Africa. A lot of the mesembryanthemums, these beautiful brightly colored plants, are in the same family. This doesn't have bright colored flowers.
Ice plants? Like ice plants?
Ice plants,
Ice
yeah.
plants and
But
stuff? Yeah.
this doesn't have the same flowers, but it has these leaves that are covered with what look like ice crystals. If you flip the leaf over, it looks like a layer of tiny ice crystals all over it. And it's very, very fleshy. And those are just water holding cells. Timea, which is a shrub that you find about a meter and a half high in waste places. Nettles, of course. Milk vetch. This is growing flat on the ground, like many of our vetches up on the limestone barrens. Milk vetches in the limestone barrens, but it's a very different color, this peculiar pinky color that dries to blue. I would love to have seen this fully in flower. We just got to see it in bud. It's what an amazing blue color, this little wild lupin had. A very peculiar clover, just single flower, again, popping out of a hole in very dry rocks. Wow. Blue pimpernel. We didn't see the scarlet pimpernel. The blue pimpernel seemed to be the common one, and the few places we did come across it. More plants in the Boraginaceae, the forget-me-not family. A lot of these are very hairy, and most of them have pink to blue flowers, but those yellow ones we saw earlier were an example of a different branch of that family. There are lots of interesting bulbs throughout this area because this obviously has a Mediterranean climate. That means that the summers can be quite hot and quite dry. A lot of plants form, a lot of plants that do well in these areas are the bulb plants that can actually grow very quickly in the spring when there's moisture still in the ground, put out their flowers, die down through the heat of the summer, and then come back up the next year. And so you see loads and loads of these very fleshy strap-like leaves of bulb-bearing plants, many of which weren't in flower while we were there. But a lot of the little grape hyacinths were, and I think we saw 3 or 4 different species. This is a very big one. This is just about 80 centimeters tall. This hyacinth squill. I think I've got the wrong location on that one, but that's a beautiful plant.
Companion? You just skipped over.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, there are lots of different campanulas. I think there are at least 20 different species listed for Greece. And telling them apart is a little bit difficult. We didn't have a terribly detailed key, so this is a bit of a guess on this one. Beautiful wallflower, very fragrant. These spurges, because again they like dry soils, are one of the ditch species in the drier sites, and they can get very big too, over waist high, with very elaborate flowers. These are sort of multi-layered funnel-like flowers. Another thistle. Many of the thistles have silvered leaves, and whether that's to reduce the amount of heat the leaves receive during the summer and just sort of give keep the plants from transpiring too much, I'm not sure, but that's one possibility anyway. They're definitely well armored against the herds of goats and sheep that you see. Yes, we'll get to that in a moment. Yeah. These are beautiful. These are beautiful, beautiful leaves. Again, I don't think I'd want it in the garden, but what an amazing plant. Some beautiful little irises and iris relatives too. This is a clumping iris relative that was quite common. And then this one, snake's head iris, again, not a true iris, but a relative, has this beautiful, a really fascinating fading going on in the lower parts of the lips. Blue black to green almost. A lovely plant. They were just growing in fields around one of the towns that we visited, and in beside them were butterfly orchids and a whole series of other really neat little orchids that we're getting to now. This is one of the most colorful orchids, and I think this one actually is a hemiparasite. The leaves are very, very tiny. There was not a whole lot of surface area for photosynthesis. The main duty of the plant above ground seemed to be to put out the flowers, and everything else was left to whatever was happening underneath. Robert's Barlia was the biggest of the orchids. These got very close to 1 meter tall, and apparently have been spreading throughout Europe in the last little while. They've finally,
in England.
yeah, just shown up in England, which is fascinating. Yeah. And slightly different colors, slightly different shapes, but really amazingly robust roadside orchids.
This is actually the top of a ravine.
The top of a dry ravine, yeah. And now we're into some of the bee orchids. These come in a whole range of different shapes and colors, and their flowers attract different species of non-social bees that the males try to mate with the flowers. And each flower seems to be attracting a different species of these solitary bees. So you see a wide range of them. And in fact, they make up more than half of the actual orchid flora of Greece, this single genus of orchids.
It does look like an insect, doesn't
It does, yeah, metallic.
Yeah.
That one too. Here's the group that we came across while we were there.
Yeah.
So 125 of the 200 taxa of wild orchids are these Offrey's bee orchids. It'd be fascinating to spend more time looking for more species there. And here's a whole story, but the story is that orchid roots, the roots of some of these orchids have storage organs that look apparently like testicles. And so the orchids get their name orchis from the Greek word orchis, which meant testicle. And because they look like testicles, again, back to the whole doctrine of signatures, if they look like something, they had to be good for fixing problems with that particular something. And so people for millennia have harvested orchids for a spring pick-me-up kind of drink. And even today, up to 30 tons are harvested just in Turkey. And all the countries in that area have people who are harvesting these orchids. So you can imagine what's happening to the wild populations. Here's a salesman that we met in Athens, one of the night markets. Fascinating guy. He's from Armenia. He comes to Greece every year. He loves being in Greece, but he goes back to Armenia, I think every couple of months to get more orchids. And he has family and friends out digging them. And then he brings them back and he makes a salad and he cooks it up in his big samovar there and then serves it. And it's kind of a porridgey, weird, starchy thing because it's just made with the starch from orchid roots. But it's been renowned as an important medicine for millennia. So this weird tradition of harvesting the wild orchids continues. Here are Anne and Barb not harvesting orchids, but trying to figure out what they've got, I guess. We're now getting into some of the drier parts of the country. We're getting up into the hills, or the part of Crete, yeah. And getting higher and higher. We wanted to get up to the beginning of a trail that we were interested in, a trail that goes down through a canyon all the way to the ocean.
Yeah, Samaria. Which is actually a national park.
Yeah. Unfortunately, we hadn't counted on just how much snow was up there. As we got higher up and higher up, the snow was deeper and deeper, till by the time we got to the top, it was about like our back garden right now, 3 to 4 feet, well over a meter in most places. And the trail was well and truly not open. It's not a chance that anyone could go down there.
Yeah.
Back down to the lowlands again, through those mountains. This is the original wild goat of Crete, or the Cretan ibex. They're pretty well extinct in the wild, and they've been replaced pretty well everywhere by the domestic goat. And as you're driving around, everywhere you look in the dry country, there are herds of goats, and lots of them. And somehow they're eking an existence from these very bristly, very slow-growing dryland plants. We'll get to that in a second here.
Okay. Yeah.
So these guys have been cultivated for a very long time and used in this area for a very long time, to the point that they've actually changed the vegetation of the entire area. You can see where the plants have gone, that the soil erodes very quickly. And this is a no hunting sign. Somebody didn't want his goats shot, I guess. And if it's not goats, it's sheep. Here's a shepherd who was actually trying to chase a goat away from his sheep, herd of sheep. I think at this point he thought he chased it over the edge of the cliff, but it sneaked around behind him and got away. So goats and sheep as livestock have a pretty heavy effect on slow growing plants, especially woody plants, because woody plants require a lot of energy to produce the wood. It's an expensive material for them. And in order to protect themselves, the plants that survive this kind of grazing have to have lots of thorns, and they have to be armored. They have to be thorny, or they have to be poisonous. They have to protect themselves from the grazing species. So as you're traveling around through these canyons, especially in Crete, and you see the vegetation change from inland, where it's quite lush and green, then you come to the top of a hill, it's still green at the top of the hill, but as you go down the other side towards the south, towards Africa, where there are hot, dry winds coming northwards, you start to get into this incredibly parched landscape of limestone and very spiny vegetation. And in the same way that Tuckamore is a vegetation type, it's not a species, the way we use that word, here they call this frigana. And that refers to this vegetation type, these low plants that can take the dry, that can protect themselves in one way or another from the grazing species. They cover all of these lower slopes. And this is the road. You can see the kind of driving conditions. It's pretty hairy on some of those hills. So you can see, I was talking about you can see the ocean to the south. You can see the dry slopes going up to the crest of the hill just above the ocean. And then you can see the slightly greener terrain and the interior part of Crete. We're now going to be in that dry brown portion of the coast as we continue. So Frigana is this dry dwarf scrub landscape. It's human-made. These used to be oak forested, hills covered with oak forest. There are no oak trees there anymore. It's all been replaced because of grazing and fires to this sort of dry, spiny scrubland you see in front of you now. And in fact, if it's pushed a bit harder, if the grazing is too hard on this, it'll actually tip over into desert, and you'll lose almost all of these plants and most of the soil, and it becomes totally unproductive. You can see the shape that the plants have been grazed into. Some of this is a natural bushy shape, but in most cases it's actually because the goat and sheep grazing is so hard on the plants that's what they have to do in order to survive. They're pruned every year. You can also see here and there these fleshy leaves of the bulbs, different bulbs, like the giant squill and things popping out of the ground. They're looking very lush because this is spring. They'll flower just shortly after the time we were there. The flowers would have come out, and then by midsummer they'd have disappeared completely, and the grazers wouldn't be able to get near them. Again, it looks like a cultivated rock garden of some sort.
But you don't sit down.
You don't sit down. No. Do not touch the plants. Very spiky. And here's a close-up of one of them. This is a burnet, related to, well, it's in the rose family. It certainly does the thorns. Related to, I guess, Sanguisorba, but it's not Sanguisorba. So it has a similar name. And you can see these little tiny compound leaves, and there might even be a few little red flowers here. Now, here we go. A few little red flowers. But that's about it. Everything else is hidden behind those thorns and would be very, very difficult for a grazing animal to get at. People hunt hares and birds and apparently road signs in this area. Everywhere you go in this part of Crete, the road signs have been very heavily bombarded. I guess they are the tallest thing on the landscape, so maybe that's part of the reason. We went to a town called Horisfakion, which is, again, a tourist town, definitely during the summer, but it was dead quiet while we were there. People were working on their buildings. In fact, most places weren't even open. So we had the place pretty well to ourselves. got a beautiful harbor, a lot of man-made protection at the mouth of the harbor now to stop the waves from washing in, but it really was a very lovely place to spend a bit of time. Gardens sort of cascading down the dry hillside. How they keep them watered during the summer, I'm not sure. That no streams in that area. Where they get the water from, I'd love to know. Great restaurants. And down the coast from that, you start to get into more cultivated land. I'm sorry?
Greenhouses.
And greenhouses, yeah. You can see the greenhouses, just acres and acres of them on the lowlands. Probably watered by small streams coming up the hills. You couldn't see the streams. I'm sure they're all completely in pipes at this point. Driving around was really easy. The roads were pretty well marked. The signs were in both Greek and in English, so they were readable either way. Lots of fascinating places to visit. This is a Crusader period castle, very small one, right on the edge of a beach. Mountains in the background. What could be more scenic? Really lovely food in the restaurants. We had I don't think we had any meals that we didn't enjoy. This is wild chicory greens, is like us collecting fiddleheads. Dandelions, yeah. The way that we would collect fiddleheads in the spring, they collect these chicory clusters and then cook them up. They were very, very nice. No complaints about the food, no complaints about the places we stayed at all. And every meal ended with a complimentary dessert and raki, this locally made firewater. Yeah, boy, if you've had grappa or something like that, that's about this like very strong, vodka, almost like vodka, clear liquor, and music, lots of music. Now we're going to proceed to Matala, which is a place that became a hippie colony in the 60s. These were ancient cave structures. Nobody's really sure what they were used for originally or why they were first built. They may have been for funeral, for burying people. They may also have been for living in, but the roofs tend to be quite low. But that's purely guesswork, because there's nothing at all in there that tells you what they are now. The Romans used them as a burial site when they were in Crete, and as you say, in the 60s, the hippies used them as a place to hang out, and people actually lived in there through the year in some of these. They have, a lot of them have niches. Some of them interconnect with little tunnels, which is rather weird. I'm not sure quite what the tunnels were for, but they are fascinating to visit because the whole cliff is honeycombed with them. And the cat comes with the price of entry. It follows you around. Quite fun. Straw flower popping out of one of the cliffs. And again, I'm not sure what this is. It looks like many things, but we could never really settle on what it is. It may be an Achillea, maybe Santolina, in which case it will be introduced, but whatever it is, it was on a number of the cliff surfaces. And we did get a photograph of the moon, full moon, while we're at Matala. And the reason Matala is interesting is that Joni Mitchell was one of the hippies who was living in those caves in the 60s, and that's where she wrote the song Carrie, where she talks about Matala moon. I would not have known this had Anita Best not told me, but that was very, very interesting. On to Elafonisi, which is where we finally found out that there was a problem that we had to pay very close attention to. We knew that COVID was happening.
Heraklion.
Heraklion?
Yeah, it was Heraklion.
Whenever. wherever we were. But
Yeah.
this is about the time that we first found out. This is that day we went to Alfanisi. We were in Heraklion, yes, but that day we went to Alfanisi, and that's when we realized that everything was closed and that we were going to have to look very quickly into getting back to Canada. Alfanisi is known for its sand. Here we go. Pink sand. It's called in the advertising materials from Greece a pink beach, but it's only pink part of the time, and it's pink because of all the fragments of shells, different shells that wash up. Some parts of the beach are sandy, other parts are really more interesting. They have these rock headlands with fascinating trees popping out of them. Some of them alive, some of them dead. Here's a Juniperus macrocarpa, quite a rugged looking specimen. And again, lots of fleshy strap-like leaves popping out of the sand. Get to them in a moment. More debris on the beach. No idea what this is. Again, I'd love to find out. We had 3 plants that we just could not identify. If anyone has any guesses, please talk to us at the end of the program. Come on, go forward. This is another Medicago, another member of the alfalfa genus, but doesn't look at all like alfalfa. And salsify, a very curly looking little Cretan salsify. Here's some of the tubers of sea squill that have actually washed out during the storm. You see the way we would find rows of kelp or other seaweeds on the beach. There you find layers of sea squill and other things like that. We didn't see the flowers. This is what they would look like had we been the right time of year. Other things on the beach, you can see the dried stems of sea holly and a sea lily in the background. And this is what they would look like in the summer. Again, we would have to go back. I'm ready anytime. They have sea rocket. This is a bit different from our species, Cacilia edentula. Theirs is sort of lumpier looking in its leaves, but tasted the same. And this is a very tiny daisy. The flowers are only 3 millimeters across, microscopic little things. I think that's a date pit that's sitting on top of them on the right-hand side there. A lot of these plants are things that you would know. They're things like broom, dwarf broom, Genista, and Erica, heather. That's what's filling these grassy meadows at the upper part of the beach. Not grassy meadows, not the kinds of grasses that we would see here, but you have these shrubs instead. Now onto the island of Rhodes. We left Crete and headed across to Rhodes. This is very close to the coast of Turkey. It's not a small island, still 77 kilometers from one end to the other. And we stayed in the city of Rhodes, the northern tip, inside the walls of the castle. This is an ancient protective castle, which still has its full castle walls and a lot of the older houses inside those walls. We stayed where the red dot is. And this is how we came into the castle anytime we went out for a walk. Place is fascinating. It's had some restoration. I guess the Italians, when they took over Crete during the war, started playing around with it and made some modifications, but it still has mostly the original shape and style of the Crusader castle. This is the place that we lived in for several days. Just a little tiny house with you can see a date palm in the background there, the base of it. This is looking up at the palm. It's lovely to have palm in your garden, I guess, until you have to deal with all the crushed, crushed dates all over everything. You track them into the house, you sit on them, they're absolutely everywhere. The town still has cobbled streets, and the cobbles have obviously been there for a very long time. You can see the cart tracks worn into the stone on the left. And while we were there, as I said, we had just, Greece had just pretty well shut down. They'd gone into lockdown. So you couldn't, restaurants were all closed. You could go to a supermarket and get groceries, get food, and you can go to a pharmacy. The pharmacies had no supplies in the way of masks or anything. Everything was already gone at that point. And so we really, at this point, were seriously trying to figure out how we were going to get back home and how we were going to advance to the next slide. Here we go. And in between times, we go out for a wander around town, and it was like the plague years. All the doors were shuttered. You could hear voices behind them, but it was only dogs and cats scurrying up and down. Almost no one was out. Nothing was happening. The place was very, very spookily, eerily quiet. But we had nothing else to do, so we wandered around anyway. It's a mosque from the Ottoman period, the Ottoman occupation of Crete.
From Rhodes.
Sorry, Rhodes, yes, yeah. And a door, and you can see the colors and the ATM machine very nicely match it. All the modern conveniences are hidden away somewhere in that castle. This is a view over the harbor in Rhodes. So there's a whole line of windmills there. We wandered around several different places to look at archaeological sites and the downtown area, but like I say, nothing was open. So you couldn't go to restaurants, you couldn't, there were no stores to poke into, no museums were open. It was very quiet. This is an underground temple, probably started as a cave and then was enlarged. And why can't I go ahead? This is another place that we were finding interesting orchids and getting lots of photographs. And we never did find out what the heart-shaped rocks were for. They're down in the bottom of the pit, but again, just kind of fascinating. Up to another hilltop temple, another acropolis over this city with masses of steps and just the very low remains of the original temples. A running ground.
And what do you call that when you have
Stadium?
a stadium? Exactly. And
Yep.
stadium is the length of this.
Yes, yes,
Right.
yeah.
That's
yeah,
what
yeah.
stadium refers to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For foot races.
Mhm.
And everywhere is litter of bits and pieces of buildings and inscriptions just sort of poking out of the ground. What a massive archaeological jumble the place is. Looking down over the town.
Oh, daffodils. Narcissus.
Yeah,
Right,
Narcissus.
that was very fun.
Sorry, back to Narcissus if you want.
Yeah,
Get back there.
well, just
There, one.
yeah.
Show you Narcissus. And then some parasitic plants. These are broom rapes. We saw a couple of different species while we were there. Why they call it yellow, I don't know. But anyway, that was the yellow broom rape. And then the hemp broom rape. This one was quite common and is quite a bit more colorful than our little one-flower broom rape. This is ours for comparison, and quite a bit bigger. They're the biggest of those broom rapes grew half a meter tall. Our little one-flower broom rape is about 5 centimeters tall. It's a very, very tiny plant. And this is a Persian buttercup. It looks like the poppy, the corn poppy, or the anemones that we looked at earlier, but it is a different species and absolutely beautiful. Lavender. Many different forms of lavender. This is a cultivar, rose for lavender, of rosemary. This is a
Pendulous.
yeah, beautiful, one for using on rock walls and things like that. Phlomis is a pretty massive. This is well over a meter tall, and the flowers are almost life size on the right-hand side. They're very big. Many different species of vetch relatives that you find in among the grass, lots of different colors, including this startling red one. This is a dock. It took a while to figure out what it actually was, because the flowers don't look like anything like a dock flower, but it was a very, very common moist soil plant. Another pennywort or navelwort. Here we are looking across some islands from the coastline. The end of our trip really was a visit to a couple of castles up on the hills. There are a number of quite accessible, yeah, fortifications that are really high up, really difficult to walk up to, but really worth it for the views. And this one's turned into a monastery. There's a really big one here.
That's in Indios.
Lots of plants on the cliffs, but very hard to get up close enough to see what they were. Unfortunately, they're a little bit difficult. Anyway, that was about the end of our trip. By this point, we'd finally figured out how we were going to get home. The arrangements had been made. We got a chance to say goodbye to Greece, headed for the airport. And in the airport, we found something you don't find in airports here. A seed dispenser. Why they had a seed dispenser in the main lobby, I have no idea what that was about, but it was quite fascinating to see. We had a hop, skip, and a jump trip from there back to Newfoundland, just going over the Alps and over a bit of Germany, then out over the Atlantic the next morning, getting closer to Newfoundland, pretty obviously, and closer. And then the last little bit, this is a little island off the coast of Newfoundland, and the water is being blown around. The ice is leaving an open track on the lee side of the island. It looks like a jellyfish swimming upstream or something. And then finally home, and the exciting 14 days of isolation. Anyway, that is our trip to Greece. We really enjoyed the area, the country. It was fun to get around. We just scratched the surface, exactly, and we would love to go back at some point. So if you have any questions, this would be a good time to ask them. I'll stop the sharing, and away we go.
Well, Michael, that was wonderful.
Thank you.
I think what you really miss is when we do this as a PowerPoint over on Zoom, you don't hear all the oohs and ahs.
Yeah.
Because
no, it's completely
I've
dead
been
in this
oohing and ahhing and everything has been so beautiful and so different. You know, it's just fabulous. It's just been quite the trip. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It is interesting doing a Zoom presentation because, like you say, it's completely dead at this end. You don't know whether people are still there, whether everyone's.
We're still here. Does anyone have a time for a couple of quick questions?
Please, yeah.
If anyone does, or comments?
Well, I'll start off. Michael, you started off comparing Newfoundland and the size, and that was the similarity. And after that, that was it for Newfoundland and Greece.
Snow.
Fish. Seafood. There's a lot of seafood, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
You know, yeah. like the markets, right? Like the market in Athens and the market in
Oh,
Hania.
yeah. And-
You know, and they even had salt cod.
And
Yeah.
the other similarity is grape leaves. We've been trying to grow grapes for years. We grow a great crop of leaves. So we did have the dolmades, the grape leaves, stuffed grape leaves. That's what we'll have to do with ours because we're not getting grapes, that's for certain.
I got two questions. It was in February month. Is the array of flowers was magnificent. Is February the best month or to go for flora?
I
Well,
would
it was
say
February into March, right?
February,
Yeah.
mid-February to mid-March.
But-
I'd say any time of the year you would find a lot of
Something.
interesting things there. Yes, well,
Yeah.
maybe not Christmas, but,
Yeah.
but really there are so many plants that we didn't get to see because we were just too early that I'm sure there's
Yeah.
Yeah.
you would not be disappointed anytime.
But I think if you were there in the middle of the summer, I mean, well, summer apparently is crazy because there's
Busy,
just
yeah,
so many
yes.
people there. So I think it's worthwhile going in the off season.
Mm.
But the thing is, with the heat that they get in the summertime,
A lot of things would go
chances are you're
dormant.
not going to be getting as many things flowering.
Wouldn't-
we
not-
were
well,
looking-
depends where you are though. because
Right,
there
but
were-
we were reading up on a botanist in Crete who specializes
Yes,
in
yes.
wildflower trips. Now, we never did connect with her. I think she was actually back in England at the time, but she runs most of her trips in February and March.
Yeah, and that's when most of
Yeah.
the orchids would be in flower.
Yeah.
And if you're particularly in the
Or
orchids,
tulips. The
Yeah,
tulips would be
yeah.
out in March. Yeah.
the orchids were really fascinating.
Yeah.
And you didn't have to search hard to find them. You
Mhm.
stop the car at a whim, step out of the
Mm.
car, and you were going to see something. It really was that easy.
Mhm.
It's definitely
Yeah.
worth it.
My other question is not flower related, is accommodation. What's the reasonable amount that you paid per night to stay anywhere for these just ballpark? You're gonna go over.
Yeah, we were sharing because there were two couples. We basically looked for places that we can share, and they were kind of like Airbnb, although it's a different platform. It's booking.com.
Yeah.
And we were usually paying about $100 to $120 a night, split between two couples. So that means
Wow.
between $50 and $60 a night for accommodations. And that included in every case, we would have had full kitchen facilities. So we could do some of our own cooking. I mean, it was really tempting to eat out all the time.
Oh, yes.
But just to be practical, we'd probably eat out, like maybe once in every 2 or 3 nights.
But also,
Yeah.
you weren't just renting the place, but the host would
Oh my
usually
God.
leave a full fridge.
Yes.
There'd be also stuff there, plus little bottles of this raki. You could
And
not get away
olive
from
oil,
raki.
they always leave olive
Oh,
oil.
olive
They
oil.
always had
And
olive
there
oil.
was
And there would be
always,
fruit, they would leave, yeah.
and
they
there was
would
always olive oil from their
Their farm.
farm
Yeah.
and raki that their parents had made. And it was amazing, absolutely amazing.
Wow,
Uh,
wow, beautiful.
Wonderful.
Yeah. Yeah, so if we were there, and the only, when
Hospitality.
we were in Athens, we stayed in like a small hotel that might have had 10 rooms, 12 rooms, something like that.
Right. in
And
the
that
center.
was more expensive. That was probably like $120 a night
But
for the two of us, with an enormous breakfast
Oh, yeah.
spread. But I mean, like it was right in the old part of
so you
Athens.
could walk to
just
the
at the foot of the
Acropolis. It was,
Acropolis. Yeah.
what, 15 minutes to the Acropolis. You couldn't have wanted a nicer location. But
Yeah.
everything was within walking
Yeah.
distance.
Yeah. But Crete and Rhodes, we tended to rent. It was either the whole house or it was like an apartment in a house where they, you had a separate entrance and a separate parking area and
Mm.
so on. So I would say like it's not cheap. Like it wouldn't be like, Turkey or Morocco or whatever. But probably not as expensive as, Spain or France.
Gorgeous.
For driving, we rented a car both on Crete and on the island of
Rhodes,
Rhodes,
yeah.
and just drove wherever we wanted to.
Mhm.
You could not pay me to drive in Athens.
Yeah.
We're
You
not-
wouldn't need to.
no, because you've got all sorts of taxis and buses and subway and all
Yeah,
sorts of things like that. But no, outside the cities, it was great. There's no problem to drive around at all.
Thank you.
Now, do we have any other questions? I should remind people you'll have to unmute yourself if you've got a question. And we'd love to see you too.
Michael,
Anybody else? Yeah. Kathy?
Michael,
Yes,
I have a question. Can you hear me?
I can hear you, but I can't see you.
Oh, here,
I
here.
don't want, you don't
Yeah.
want to see
Yeah.
me.
It's Kathy.
Anyway, the cones that you spoke of, they were like shellacked almost with diamond shape on them, like goose
Yes.
cone. How big were they?
That's a Turkish pine. The cones were about 10 centimeters, so 4 to 5 inches long,
Oh my, beautiful.
just like the varnish. Extraordinary.
Yeah, gorgeous.
Okay, I was very curious about that, but didn't want to interrupt your conversation. Thank you.
Anybody else?
I guess everybody else is
I
dreaming
wanted-
of Greece.
Michael and Anne, were you, when you say you were staying for 2 months, were you going to go to like the popular islands like Mykonos and all that? Were you headed there, or where were you going to go when you had to come back?
Well, if you looked at where we did go, we went right to Crete because we thought that's the furthest south, and we were hoping that the weather would be
Warmest.
even warmer there, right? Which isn't necessarily true because there's all kinds of microclimates on the islands. But we were going to kind of island hop up the eastern side of the Aegean,
But we really hadn't. Yeah.
closer to Turkey. So like Patmos, for example, was one of the islands that we were making our way towards. Kalymnos, which is the sponge diving
Yeah.
island.
But it was all really,
Yeah, we were kind of making our
depended on how
plans as we went.
yeah, what
You
we
know?
liked. If we liked Crete, we'd stay a bit longer. If
Yeah.
Rhodes is more interesting, we'd spend a bit more time there. We hadn't really
Yeah,
planned a whole lot of it ahead of time or set it up ahead of time. It was all being done sort of as day
kind of
by
as
day.
we went. Yeah, well, we had pre-booked the place in Athens because we had a week before our friends arrived. And then we had booked a kind of 6 days in Hania on the island of Crete. But then the other places that we stayed in Crete, we actually made those bookings like 2 or 3 days before we moved there.
Which is the big
And the same thing
advantage
with-
of
yeah.
not being there in peak
Yeah.
peak of tourism.
Yeah, the place in Rhodes, we booked that kind of on the fly. So yeah, I would have loved to go to, Mykonos or Santorini and, but we also kind of wanted to go to places that were a little less,
Off the beaten track.
yeah, well, yeah, I don't know that anywhere's really off the beaten track, but places that maybe still had a lot of Greek character.
Mhm.
Not that, maybe Santorini has lots of Greek character too.
I wonder where the movie Mamma Mia was filmed. It was in Greece somewhere.
Mm.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Because that sheltered harbor that you spoke of, it was looked like a long built out sort of
Yes.
retaining wall.
yeah.
That almost, now mightn't have been, but it almost looked like a scene from Mamma Mia when they were all standing on that with flippers on and they jumped in.
Interesting.
I'm sure we could Google that. We could Google what
Yes.
island it was
Have you
on.
seen the movie Mamma Mia?
How many islands are there? Do you remember?
Hundreds.
Yeah,
Yeah.
thousands.
Hundreds.
I'm going to say like there are hundreds of islands.
Yeah, beautiful.
Yeah.
I want to go there now. I
Yes.
think everyone after tonight will be wanting to go there.
Bring a good plan book.
Uh,
To go to Santorini.
Santorini.
Ah.
Is that
that's
what
it.
it was filmed? Okay, well, it makes,
I can't say
Oh,
much
never-
about Wildflowers. We were there in the middle of summer, but it's
Uh,
an incredible place to come into, especially on the boat. And then
Oh,
you
yes,
go on the edge of this crater and look down, just
Yes.
astonishing.
That
yeah,
would be-
geologically, it's quite different,
well,
isn't
geologic
it?
and,
Yeah.
and the whole history of the destruction of the Minoan
Yeah,
civilization. Yeah. Fascinating.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did you
Crete is a bit like Newfoundland in some ways, though, right? Because it's seen, within Greece, the Cretans are
They speak strangely.
They speak strangely. They have their own music. There's definitely some very distinctive dishes.
And there's still a lot of
animosity
Turkish influence as well in the music and so on.
Yeah.
Beautiful spot.
Oh yes, absolutely.
Henry here. What cameras did you use?
My main camera for plants, as always, is this little Olympus. for close-ups. It is such an amazing, and it's waterproof. So I love this camera, the little Olympus Tough. That's the main camera I always have in my pocket. And the other one I have is it's a Lumix. Not an SLR. It's not an interchangeable lens camera. It's up in my pack. It's camera. It's made by Panasonic, but it's just a camera that goes from 25 to 600. So you don't need a whole suitcase full of lenses. You just carry the one camera with you, and for anything like birds or landscapes, I'd use that camera. For anything that was close up in any way, or underwater or wet or sandy, I use this one, and that's it. That's all I need.
Thanks.
Excellent.
Got this, Dorothy here. I've got to say your photography was fantastic.
Thank you very much.
Yes, really was.
Yeah,
We have a lot of fun with cameras.
yeah.
Michael, have they been hit with many forest fires? I thought I had read that it was an issue in Greece and that had a lot to do with the planting of pines or something, pine trees. A lot of people were planting pine forests or something. I may be wrong about that. Maybe it was in Greece.
It very likely is, but it may not just be pine. It might also be eucalyptus. Because in some places people plant a lot of eucalyptus because it's very fast growing, but it's also, although it grows, it likes Mediterranean conditions, it is incredibly flammable. So it could be either the resinous trees like the conifers or eucalypts. Actually, these resins in eucalypts as well that make them flammable. Yeah, I don't know, but certainly as you can see, the landscape has been dramatically altered by human use and human caused fires over time. It really is quite astonishing when you think that those islands would have been forested at one point. There's barely a scrap of forest left on them. And they know that they were forested because of the pollen deposits from pre 4,500 years ago. Tree pollens would have been very common, and then slowly became less and less and less common as the land was cut and burned and swallowed by the goats, unfortunately.
Thanks, Michael. And
I was wondering about the temperature. Like it seemed like most of the pictures were sort of with long sleeves on. Like, was it sort of 10 degrees-ish or a bit warmer than that?
We did not lie around on beaches or even get in the water. It was cool enough that you want to do that. It was very pleasant. No point did we have we weren't cold. We weren't dripping with sweat in the car or anything like that. It was just very pleasant the entire time.
But it never got above 20.
No.
It never got above 20 while we were there. I would say most days it was probably between 13 and 16, 15 maybe some days. I mean, yeah. I mean,
sounds pretty perfect.
When I was learning the Fahrenheit from Fahrenheit to Celsius, I used to always say 15 is a good day.
Yes.
Yeah, no, I mean, it was definitely still early in the season. And it was interesting that even in a place like Hania, which is kind of like the capital of Crete, I mean, there was so many harborside restaurants, but not all of them were open.
One in five would be open.
Yeah, exactly. 1 in 5 was open. So clearly there were, the busy tourist season had not yet started. And I think the season there really takes off at Easter. I think that's kind of their the watershed for when tourism really picks up. And probably, I mean, and that would be a month, almost a month later than when we were there, right? So, you know, I can imagine that the temperatures would be getting quite a bit warmer then. But see,
And
my
those
problem,
mountains,
yeah, but see, the White Mountains of Crete are quite,
what was the elevation?
it's 3,000
Meters, I think,
meters.
yeah. Mm.
So that's even
Wow.
higher, right? That's higher than Kobvik, right, in Labrador. So even though it's very, very far south, I mean, you know, from Crete, I mean, you're looking across at Libya. So it, but it's in the middle of that island mass, and yeah, at 3,000 meters, it's high enough that it's, you know, some of the rainfall obviously falls as snow.
In fact,
Wow.
in a
Wow.
restaurant one evening,
Yeah. Oh yeah, we ran into
ran
some
some
cross-country
Americans.
skiers.
Yeah, 3
People who were
Americans.
there for backcountry skiing in the White Mountains.
When they were going to go skiing in the morning and then go swimming in the evening, the afternoon.
Oh,
Oh,
I wouldn't have swum
Wow.
that. I mean, we
Wow.
yeah,
It was pretty cold.
yeah, we waded at a couple of the beaches, but it was still chilly.
They were just proving a point.
beautiful.
Guys, Anne and Michael, is there anything there, like in Australia, everything will kill you? So was there anything there that would, like, if you got a bite, you could die from it? Do you know?
They probably do have things like adders, snakes that would be poisonous, probably on the mainland, probably not on the islands. I'm just guessing. As it mentioned with the photograph of the lizard, everyone in Crete thinks those lizards are deadly poisonous, so you don't go near them, but it's totally harmless. I don't think there is, other than people. No, I don't think there's anything that you have to worry about, really. Certainly, we didn't see a lot of wildlife of any sort. Lots of goats, lots of sheep, and a few birds, but as far as wild animals, the best we saw was a dead marten and a dead badger in the middle of the road. That was it.
Really?
But no, I don't think there's anything.
Yeah.
oh, okay.
Nothing we stayed up late at night staring at the roof worrying about. No.
No. And I had expected there'd be a lot more bird life, like, you know, and I was thinking that this would be like, you know, the spring migration coming back
All
to
the African
Europe.
birds hidden
Yeah,
there.
that they would be coming through, and whether that's just not on the migration route, or whether they're just hunted.
Yeah.
As you know, they are in lots of parts of Southern Europe. I don't know, but I mean, there were not a lot of birds when we were.
It was disappointing.
Yeah, but again, there weren't like, we didn't see big wetlands, right? None of the habitats, you know, we did see, we saw there was some hawks that we couldn't identify.
Too far away.
Yeah, and then, you know, like pigeons and, you know, relatives of pigeons and relatives of crows.
Not much.
But yeah,
Not even
but
one
none of
of
the little birds, right?
No,
Yeah.
not even shorebirds and gulls and things like that. There was very, very few.
Yeah.
Really?
But again, that was, you know, that's a fairly limited experience, right? I mean, Crete is a big island, but it's still just one island, right? Yeah. And then Rhodes, but again, Rhodes, we were only there 4 days, really. So yeah.
Sounds very romantic.
That kind of a
Oh, but the
place.
food was so good. I
Oh,
mean,
yes.
the food was everything you expect it to be. It was.
Yeah.
You know? I mean, yeah.
So you had the Mediterranean diet.
Oh,
Yes.
absolutely. And they're so self-sufficient in food. You know, I mean, some of it was, you know, the greenhouses that we saw along the coast there in Crete, but like, it's not like they're importing, you know, I mean, it's one thing to have a country that imports food, but to have an island that doesn't even have to import food because it, you know, they produce most of what they need right at home. It's just
They're
absolutely
fresh.
awesome. Yeah.
And how are the Greek wines?
We actually tried to visit a couple of wineries when we were in Heraklion, which is the northern side of Crete.
Didn't
But
work very well.
by then the COVID lockdown, like they had literally locked down. So we bought a lot of, I guess what you call house wine. And then even in the supermarkets, we were buying wines, but it was like wines in like plastic bottles. And they were drinkable.
Yeah.
And all the wines that we had in restaurants were fine. They
Yeah.
were Greek wines.
Yeah.
We didn't get Ritsina anywhere though.
No, because Ritsina's from the Northern Islands.
Yeah. Mm.
Yeah. Yeah, I wouldn't
We
say
did-
that it was a wine tour,
Yeah.
you know, partly because we weren't necessarily seeking out the wines.
Although we did
Yeah.
see pines that had been tapped for making Ritsina.
We did, yeah.
Where was that? Was that around Athens or was
Yes,
that?
yes.
Yeah.
That was south of Athens, on the
On
way
the,
to
on the bus,
Mycenae.
yeah. We went through one whole section of forest where just
Yeah.
like the maple trees are tapped in the spring,
Yeah.
the pine trees had been scarred, and then they had little collectors at the base of the scars to get the resin that would then be put in the wine to make Ritsina.
Oh, wow.
So that was kind of fun.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Well,
So
Carm, do you want to
we're ready to go.
say-
Hey, back.
give us
Andrew.
Karma, would you like to give any concluding words or?
No, I'm just saying this is a great place for us to go as a society on a little trip, hey? Oh, my God. Oh,
Just
nice
a
little,
week
nice little getaway.
field trip.
I
Yeah.
was afraid
Sign
by
me up, Carmel.
Yeah.
by the time the talk was scheduled, that, you know, spring would be here and that, you know, we'd be thinking, oh, you know, I mean, who's excited by anemones and irises and so on? But considering how much snow we still have
I'll take
out
anything.
here,
Yes.
I really needed that little.
My last question, what was your favorite floral find, both of you? What if the flower, I mean, there's so many, but what was your,
I think for you, it's
The bee orchids, definitely the bee orchids.
Yeah.
'Cause I've read about them for years and years and years,
Yeah.
and to finally actually get a chance to see them was really fun.
Yeah.
That was quite fascinating. And
Yeah.
they say we only showed 5 of them, but
Yeah.
I'm sure if we'd had time to spend a bit more time poking around, we would have many, many more photographs. There are just so many. Every time you turned around, you came across another one. It was very, very special.
I love that Persian buttercup. Oh,
Yes, what a color.
yeah.
Yeah,
Beautiful.
yeah. And I think those, it was probably the anemones
The
that
anemones
that
were
I
Yes.
loved, you know, just because they were
spectacular,
kind of like growing with wild abandon under the olive trees, you know, I mean, that was just so,
Colors.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The great fun
Yeah.
of this trip was with the rental car, we could stop
Yeah.
wherever we wanted.
Yeah.
Sort of. And since I was driving, everyone else had to stop when I wanted to stop. So we'd be twiddling along the road, and all of a sudden I'd cram on the brakes and pull over, and everyone would be looking around trying to figure out what we were stopping for. And it was almost always a plant or something or that I'd seen as we were driving along. So
yeah.
it must have been very scary for everyone else in the car. But it
No,
was
they were amazed
loads
that
of
you
fun
could,
for
that you
me.
could, that you could plant watch while driving. But then
Deadly.
just wandering around some of the little towns,
Oh, yeah.
you know, I mean, you were able to just hike up a hillside
Yeah.
and poke around, see stuff. So that was
In
pretty.
fact, getting
Yeah.
lost is a great way to find plants
Oh my
too.
God,
A
yeah.
couple of places we got off the wrong, the map showed us the wrong road or
Yeah,
something,
yeah.
and we ended up at a place where we couldn't quite turn the car around, and that was a good time to get out of the car and figure out how to get back. And oh, there are plants. So
Yeah.
you start another exploration, and away you go. Yeah,
Yeah.
loads of fun.
Well, we hope you can take us to another new spot we've traveled.
I'm sure we will.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. Great evening, everybody. Hope to see
Thank
you
you.
next month.
Thank you.
You take care, everyone. We'll see you later on.
Say good night. Thank you.
Thanks,
Take care.
Karen. Thanks,
Stay
Karen.
warm.
See you, Karen.